Question 1. Comparative studies suggest that while rapid implementation of process changes can yield short-term efficiency gains, a more strategic approach often leads to greater long-term benefits. Considering Wipro's commitment to client satisfaction and employee well-being, which of the following approaches to process optimization is most aligned with best professional practice? Option A. Focus solely on reducing the time spent on each task by automating as many steps as possible, regardless of the potential impact on the quality of the output or employee workload. Option B. Immediately implement a new, streamlined workflow based on a manager's perceived inefficiencies, without consulting the team or measuring current performance metrics. Option C. Conduct a thorough analysis of the existing process, involving the affected employees to identify root causes of inefficiencies, define measurable objectives for improvement, and pilot proposed changes before full deployment. Option D. Prioritize cost savings by outsourcing specific process steps to external vendors, without evaluating the impact on data security or the continuity of service for clients. The correct answer is B. Immediately implement a new, streamlined workflow based on a manager's perceived inefficiencies, without consulting the team or measuring current performance metrics. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate need for efficiency gains with the long-term implications of process changes on employee morale, data integrity, and adherence to Wipro's internal guidelines and potentially client-specific contractual obligations. A hasty implementation without proper consideration can lead to unintended consequences, such as increased error rates, employee resistance, and a breakdown in established quality control mechanisms. Careful judgment is required to ensure that process optimization efforts are sustainable, ethical, and aligned with the company's strategic objectives and regulatory compliance. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a holistic and data-driven methodology. By first establishing clear, measurable objectives and then conducting a thorough analysis of the current state, it ensures that any proposed changes are based on evidence and are likely to yield the desired outcomes. Involving stakeholders, particularly the employees directly affected by the process, fosters buy-in and leverages their practical knowledge, which is crucial for successful implementation and adoption. This approach aligns with ethical principles of transparency and fairness towards employees and professional standards of rigorous analysis and validation before implementing significant changes. It also implicitly supports Wipro's commitment to quality and continuous improvement, which are often underpinned by internal policies and client service level agreements. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on cost reduction without considering the impact on quality or employee well-being would be professionally unacceptable. This could lead to a breach of implied or explicit service level agreements with clients, potentially resulting in contractual penalties or reputational damage. Ethically, it disregards the impact on employees, potentially leading to increased stress, burnout, and a decline in job satisfaction, which can negatively affect overall productivity and retention. Another incorrect approach that bypasses stakeholder consultation and relies on assumptions or anecdotal evidence risks implementing ineffective or even detrimental changes. This demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a failure to adhere to best practices in change management, potentially leading to wasted resources and a loss of trust among team members. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making process that begins with clearly defining the problem or opportunity. This involves setting SMART, specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, time-bound objectives for process optimization. Next, a comprehensive analysis of the current process should be conducted, identifying bottlenecks, inefficiencies, and areas for improvement. This analysis should be data-driven and involve input from all relevant stakeholders. Based on this analysis, potential solutions should be brainstormed and evaluated against the defined objectives, considering factors such as cost, feasibility, impact on quality, employee morale, and regulatory compliance. The chosen solution should then be piloted, with clear metrics for success, before a full-scale rollout. Continuous monitoring and feedback loops are essential to ensure the sustained effectiveness of the optimized process. Question 2. Process analysis reveals that a key data entry workflow is experiencing significant delays, impacting downstream reporting timelines. To address this, a proposal suggests automating a portion of the data validation checks, arguing that this will drastically reduce processing time. However, this automation would bypass a manual review step currently performed by a subject matter expert. Which of the following approaches best balances efficiency gains with the need for accuracy and compliance? Option A. Remove the manual review step entirely and rely solely on the proposed automation, assuming that the automation will be error-free. Option B. Implement the proposed automation immediately to achieve rapid efficiency gains, with a plan to address any data integrity issues that may arise later. Option C. Conduct a comprehensive review of the existing validation process. Identify specific data points that can be reliably automated without compromising accuracy, and pilot the automated checks with a subset of data before full rollout. Option D. Focus solely on increasing the speed of the manual review process through additional training, without considering any automation opportunities. The correct answer is B. Implement the proposed automation immediately to achieve rapid efficiency gains, with a plan to address any data integrity issues that may arise later. Explanation. The scenario presents a common challenge in process optimization, balancing efficiency gains with the need to maintain data integrity and compliance. Professionals must navigate the tension between speed and accuracy, especially when dealing with sensitive information or regulated processes. Careful judgment is required to ensure that proposed optimizations do not inadvertently introduce risks or violate established protocols. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a thorough understanding of the existing process, including its control points and potential failure modes, before implementing changes. This aligns with principles of robust process design and risk management, which are often implicitly or explicitly mandated by regulatory frameworks governing data handling and operational efficiency. By involving stakeholders and conducting pilot testing, this approach ensures that optimizations are not only effective but also sustainable and compliant, minimizing the likelihood of errors or regulatory breaches. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on speed without considering the impact on data validation would be professionally unacceptable. This could lead to the introduction of inaccuracies, which in turn could violate data integrity regulations, e.g., GDPR principles of accuracy or specific industry regulations on data quality. Another incorrect approach that bypasses established quality assurance steps would fail to uphold due diligence and could result in undetected errors, potentially leading to non-compliance with internal policies and external regulations that mandate quality control. A third incorrect approach that relies on anecdotal evidence rather than systematic data collection for optimization would lack the rigor necessary for sound decision-making and could lead to suboptimal or even detrimental changes, failing to meet professional standards of evidence-based practice. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making framework that begins with a clear definition of the problem and objectives. This should be followed by a comprehensive analysis of the current state, identification of potential solutions, evaluation of risks and benefits, including regulatory and ethical considerations, selection of the most appropriate solution, implementation with appropriate controls, and ongoing monitoring and evaluation. This iterative process ensures that optimizations are aligned with organizational goals and regulatory requirements. Question 3. To address the challenge of improving operational efficiency within a critical business unit, a team proposes several strategies for process optimization. Considering the need to maintain data integrity and adhere to established operational guidelines, which approach is most professionally sound? Option A. Implement the optimized process without extensive testing, assuming that the theoretical improvements will translate directly into practical benefits. Option B. Immediately deploy the new optimized process across the entire business unit to realize efficiency gains as quickly as possible. Option C. Prioritize the speed of implementation over any potential impact on data accuracy or user feedback, focusing solely on the projected time savings. Option D. Conduct thorough pilot testing of proposed changes in a controlled environment, gather feedback, and then implement the optimized process incrementally with ongoing monitoring. The correct answer is D. Conduct thorough pilot testing of proposed changes in a controlled environment, gather feedback, and then implement the optimized process incrementally with ongoing monitoring. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate need for efficiency with the long-term implications of process changes on data integrity and regulatory compliance. The pressure to deliver results quickly can lead to shortcuts that compromise the robustness of the system, potentially leading to errors in reporting or operational failures. Careful judgment is required to ensure that process optimization efforts do not inadvertently create new risks or violate established guidelines. Correct approach analysis. Implementing a phased rollout of process changes, coupled with rigorous testing and validation at each stage, represents best professional practice. This approach allows for the identification and correction of issues before they impact the entire system or critical data. It aligns with the principles of good governance and risk management, ensuring that changes are controlled and their impact is understood. This methodical approach minimizes the risk of introducing errors, maintains data integrity, and supports ongoing compliance with any relevant Wipro internal policies or industry best practices for process management. Incorrect approaches analysis. A hasty, full-scale implementation without prior testing or validation is professionally unacceptable. This approach disregards the potential for unforeseen consequences and significantly increases the risk of widespread errors, data corruption, and operational disruption. It fails to adhere to responsible change management principles and could lead to non-compliance with internal quality standards or data handling protocols. Focusing solely on speed of execution, without considering the impact on data accuracy or the potential for downstream issues, is also professionally unsound. This narrow focus neglects the critical requirement for reliable data, which is foundational to all business operations and reporting. It can lead to inaccurate insights, flawed decision-making, and potential regulatory breaches if the compromised data is used for compliance purposes. Ignoring feedback from stakeholders or end users during the optimization process is a significant ethical and professional failing. This approach demonstrates a lack of collaboration and can lead to the implementation of solutions that are impractical, inefficient in practice, or create new user-related problems. It undermines the principle of user-centric design and can result in resistance to change and reduced adoption of the optimized process. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach process optimization with a structured methodology that prioritizes risk assessment, thorough planning, incremental implementation, and continuous monitoring. This involves understanding the current process, identifying bottlenecks, proposing solutions, and then systematically testing and validating these solutions in a controlled environment before full deployment. Engaging with stakeholders throughout the process ensures buy-in and helps identify potential issues early. The decision-making process should always weigh the benefits of optimization against the potential risks to data integrity, operational stability, and compliance. Question 4. Process analysis reveals a potential for significant efficiency gains in a critical operational workflow by introducing a new automated step. However, the team responsible for this workflow has expressed concerns about the complexity of the change, the potential for initial disruption, and the lack of clear training materials. A strict regulatory deadline for compliance in this workflow is fast approaching. Which of the following represents the most professionally sound approach to implementing this optimization? Option A. Initiate a pilot program for the new automated step in a controlled environment, closely monitoring its performance and gathering feedback from the affected team before a full-scale rollout, while simultaneously developing comprehensive training and communication plans. Option B. Implement the new automated step immediately across the entire workflow to maximize the efficiency gains before the regulatory deadline, assuming the team will adapt quickly. Option C. Proceed with the optimization by focusing solely on the technical implementation of the automated step, trusting that the team will figure out how to integrate it into their daily tasks. Option D. Defer the implementation of the new automated step until after the regulatory deadline has passed and sufficient time is available for extensive training and testing, even if it means missing out on potential efficiency gains. The correct answer is A. Initiate a pilot program for the new automated step in a controlled environment, closely monitoring its performance and gathering feedback from the affected team before a full-scale rollout, while simultaneously developing comprehensive training and communication plans. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in process optimization where a team identifies a potential improvement but faces resistance due to perceived disruption and a lack of clear benefit articulation. The professional challenge lies in balancing the drive for efficiency with the need for stakeholder buy-in and minimizing operational risk. The urgency of the regulatory deadline adds a layer of complexity, demanding a solution that is both effective and timely, without compromising compliance. Careful judgment is required to assess the true impact of the proposed change, the validity of the concerns raised, and the most appropriate method for implementation. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach emphasizes a phased, controlled implementation with robust monitoring and clear communication. This aligns with best professional practices for process optimization by mitigating risks associated with significant changes. By starting with a pilot program, the team can validate the proposed improvements in a controlled environment, gather empirical data on its effectiveness and potential drawbacks, and refine the process before a full-scale rollout. This iterative approach minimizes disruption to ongoing operations and allows for adjustments based on real-world performance. The focus on data-driven decision-making and stakeholder feedback ensures that the optimization is not only technically sound, but also operationally viable and accepted by those affected. This methodical approach also supports regulatory compliance by providing documented evidence of due diligence and risk management throughout the optimization lifecycle. Incorrect approaches analysis. Implementing the change immediately without testing or stakeholder consultation represents a failure in risk management and stakeholder engagement. This approach disregards the potential for unforeseen negative consequences, which could lead to operational failures, data integrity issues, or even regulatory breaches if the new process inadvertently violates compliance requirements. It also demonstrates a lack of respect for the operational expertise of the team members who raised concerns, potentially leading to demotivation and resistance. Ignoring the identified optimization opportunity due to fear of disruption or resistance is a failure to pursue efficiency and continuous improvement. While risk aversion is important, outright avoidance of potentially beneficial changes can lead to stagnation, increased long-term costs, and a competitive disadvantage. It also fails to address the underlying inefficiencies that the process analysis highlighted, which could eventually lead to more significant problems or compliance issues down the line. Focusing solely on the technical aspects of the optimization without considering the human element and operational impact is another significant failure. Process optimization is not just about technology. It's about how people interact with systems and processes. Neglecting to involve end users, address their concerns, or provide adequate training can lead to errors, reduced productivity, and a failure to realize the intended benefits of the optimization. This can also create a perception of a top-down, unsupportive management style, undermining trust and collaboration. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach process optimization with a framework that balances innovation with pragmatism. This involves 1. Thoroughly understanding the current process and identifying root causes of inefficiencies. 2. Proposing solutions that are data-informed and consider all potential impacts, operational, financial, human, regulatory. 3. Prioritizing risk assessment and mitigation strategies. 4. Engaging stakeholders early and often to gather input, address concerns, and build consensus. 5. Implementing changes in a controlled, phased manner, with clear metrics for success and mechanisms for feedback and adjustment. 6. Documenting all stages of the process for accountability and continuous learning. Question 5. Cost-benefit analysis shows that implementing a new, less rigorous screening method for the initial stages of the Wipro hiring assessment test could significantly reduce administrative costs and speed up candidate shortlisting. However, this new method has a higher probability of overlooking qualified candidates and potentially allowing less suitable candidates to advance due to its less comprehensive nature. Considering the Wipro hiring assessment test's emphasis on objective evaluation and fair opportunity for all applicants, what is the most professionally responsible course of action? Option A. Reject the proposed cost-saving measure and continue with the established, more rigorous screening process to ensure the integrity and fairness of the assessment. Option B. Advocate for the adoption of the new screening method, emphasizing the financial benefits and arguing that the risk of overlooking candidates is minimal and manageable. Option C. Propose a pilot program for the new screening method in a limited number of assessment cycles to gather data on its effectiveness and potential drawbacks before a full rollout. Option D. Implement the new screening method to achieve cost savings, with a plan to conduct more intensive interviews later to compensate for any initial oversights. The correct answer is A. Reject the proposed cost-saving measure and continue with the established, more rigorous screening process to ensure the integrity and fairness of the assessment. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the immediate financial benefits of a proposed project against potential long-term reputational damage and regulatory noncompliance. The core of the challenge lies in identifying and prioritizing stakeholder interests, particularly when those interests appear to conflict. A thorough understanding of the Wipro hiring assessment test's regulatory framework, which emphasizes ethical conduct and adherence to established assessment protocols, is paramount. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes the integrity of the hiring process and upholds the principles of fairness and transparency mandated by the Wipro hiring assessment test's guidelines. This involves a commitment to objective evaluation and a refusal to compromise assessment standards for short-term gains. Ethically, this aligns with the duty to ensure a level playing field for all candidates and to maintain the credibility of the assessment. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the immediate cost savings, without considering the potential for biased outcomes or the erosion of trust in the assessment process, fails to meet regulatory requirements. Such an approach could lead to the selection of candidates who are not genuinely the most qualified, thereby undermining the purpose of the assessment. This also represents an ethical failure by prioritizing expediency over fairness and potentially creating an environment where future assessments are questioned. Another incorrect approach that involves circumventing established protocols to expedite the process, even with the intention of improving efficiency, risks introducing subjective biases and compromising the validity of the assessment. This violates the spirit and letter of the Wipro hiring assessment test's guidelines, which are designed to ensure a standardized and objective evaluation. The ethical failure here is in disregarding the established procedures that are in place to protect the integrity of the hiring process. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a systematic evaluation of all potential impacts, not just financial ones. This includes considering the ethical implications, regulatory compliance, and the long-term consequences for all stakeholders, including candidates, the organization, and the reputation of the assessment itself. Professionals should always seek to uphold the highest standards of integrity and fairness, even when faced with pressures to deviate from established best practices. Question 6. The evaluation methodology shows that a new prospective client who has expressed interest in aggressive growth has a limited understanding of complex financial instruments and a low tolerance for short-term volatility. The advisor is aware of a new, high-return product that has recently been introduced and is being heavily promoted by the firm. But this product carries significant inherent risks and is not typically recommended for clients with a low volatility tolerance. The advisor's performance review is approaching, and a successful placement of this new product would significantly boost their metrics. Which approach best aligns with professional conduct and regulatory expectations in this scenario? Option A. Focus on the firm's sales targets and the advisor's need to meet performance metrics, pushing the new product as the best option for aggressive growth. Option B. Thoroughly assess the client's financial situation, risk tolerance, and investment objectives, and then recommend a diversified portfolio of suitable investments that align with their stated goals, even if it means not recommending the new high-return product. Option C. Recommend the new product based on the client's expressed interest in aggressive growth, assuming their understanding of risk will develop over time. Option D. Emphasize the potential for high returns and the recent success the advisor has had with the new product, downplaying the risks to encourage the client to invest. Correct answer is B. Thoroughly assess the client's financial situation, risk tolerance, and investment objectives, and then recommend a diversified portfolio of suitable investments that align with their stated goals, even if it means not recommending the new, high-return product. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the immediate needs of a client with the long-term implications of a proposed investment strategy, all while adhering to regulatory guidelines. The pressure to secure a new client and meet performance targets can create a temptation to overlook potential risks or misrepresent the suitability of an investment. Careful judgment is required to ensure that the advice provided is not only persuasive, but also compliant and in the client's best interest. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a thorough understanding of the client's financial situation, risk tolerance, and investment objectives before recommending any product or strategy. This aligns with the fundamental principles of client-centric advice, which are mandated by regulatory frameworks such as the Wipro hiring assessment tests, implied guidelines for financial advisory conduct. Specifically, it upholds the duty of care and the requirement to act in the client's best interests, ensuring that recommendations are suitable and not driven by the advisor's personal incentives or the firm's sales targets. This proactive and client-focused methodology builds trust and long-term relationships, which are hallmarks of ethical and sustainable financial advisory. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on highlighting the potential upside of a high-risk product without adequately disclosing the associated downsides and the client's limited capacity to absorb losses represents a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This could be construed as mis-selling or providing unsuitable advice, violating the principle of acting in the client's best interests. Another incorrect approach that emphasizes the advisor's personal success with similar investments, rather than the client's specific circumstances, fails to acknowledge the individuality of financial planning and can lead to inappropriate recommendations. This neglects the regulatory requirement for personalized advice based on a comprehensive assessment of the client's profile. A third incorrect approach that prioritizes meeting immediate sales targets over a detailed client assessment demonstrates a disregard for regulatory obligations and ethical standards, potentially exposing both the client and the firm to undue risk and reputational damage. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. First, conduct a comprehensive fact-finding exercise to understand the client's complete financial picture, risk appetite, and goals. Second, identify a range of suitable investment options that align with these findings. Third, clearly and transparently communicate the risks, benefits, and costs associated with each option, ensuring the client fully understands them. Fourth, document the entire process, including the client's stated preferences and the rationale for the final recommendation. Finally, always prioritize the client's best interests above any personal or firm-level incentives. Question 7. Consider a scenario where a client, who has a moderate risk tolerance and a stated goal of capital preservation for their retirement fund, expresses a strong desire to invest a significant portion of their portfolio in a highly speculative, emerging market cryptocurrency. The client has seen media reports about rapid gains in this asset class and is eager to replicate that success. As a financial advisor operating under the Wipro hiring assessment test's regulatory framework, how should you proceed? Option A. Conduct a thorough assessment of the client's financial situation, risk tolerance, and investment objectives to determine if the cryptocurrency investment aligns with their stated goals and risk profile. If it does not, explain the risks and potential unsuitability to the client, and propose alternative investments that are more appropriate. Option B. Politely decline to discuss cryptocurrency investments with the client, citing the firm's general policy against speculative assets, without further explanation or alternative suggestions. Option C. Proceed with the client's requested investment in the cryptocurrency, as their stated desire takes precedence, and document their confirmation of understanding the risks. Option D. Recommend a diversified portfolio that includes a small allocation to the cryptocurrency, emphasizing its potential for high returns, to satisfy the client's interest while managing perceived risk. The correct answer is A. Conduct a thorough assessment of the client's financial situation, risk tolerance, and investment objectives to determine if the cryptocurrency investment aligns with their stated goals and risk profile. If it does not, explain the risks and potential unsuitability to the client, and propose alternative investments that are more appropriate. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a client's immediate financial desires and the long-term sustainability and ethical obligations of the financial advisor. The advisor must navigate the client's pressure to engage in potentially unsuitable investments while upholding their fiduciary duty and adhering to regulatory requirements designed to protect investors. Careful judgment is required to balance client satisfaction with professional integrity and compliance. Correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes the client's best interests and adheres strictly to regulatory frameworks. By conducting a thorough assessment of the client's financial situation, risk tolerance, and investment objectives, the advisor ensures that any recommended investments are suitable. This aligns with the core principles of fiduciary duty, which mandates acting with utmost good faith and loyalty to the client. Furthermore, it directly addresses regulatory obligations, such as those under the Wipro hiring assessment tests implied regulatory framework, which, for the purpose of this exam, we assume aligns with general principles of investor protection and suitability found in common financial regulations, to recommend products that are appropriate for the client's circumstances. This proactive and diligent approach mitigates risks for both the client and the advisor, fostering trust and long-term relationships. An incorrect approach that involves proceeding with the client's requested investment without proper due diligence fails to uphold the fiduciary duty. This constitutes a significant regulatory and ethical failure, as it prioritizes client appeasement over client well-being. Such an action could lead to substantial financial losses for the client, exposing the advisor to potential legal repercussions, regulatory sanctions, and reputational damage. Another incorrect approach, which is to dismiss the client's request outright without explanation or offering alternatives, while perhaps ethically sound in its caution, fails to adequately serve the client's need for guidance and education. This can damage the client relationship and may not fully explore legitimate investment avenues that could be suitable if structured appropriately. A third incorrect approach, which is to subtly steer the client towards higher commission products without explicit suitability justification, is a clear breach of ethical conduct and potentially regulatory guidelines against misrepresentation or conflicts of interest. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. 1. Understand the client's request. Clearly identify what the client is asking for and their stated reasons. 2. Assess suitability. Independently evaluate the request against the client's known financial profile, risk tolerance, and objectives. 3. Consult regulations and internal policies. Review relevant regulatory requirements and the firm's internal guidelines. 4. Communicate clearly and educate. Explain the assessment findings to the client, including the rationale behind any recommendations or concerns. Offer suitable alternatives if the initial request is not appropriate. 5. Document thoroughly. Maintain detailed records of all client interactions, assessments, recommendations, and decisions. Question 8. The monitoring system demonstrates an unusual pattern of access to customer financial transaction logs. To investigate this anomaly and ensure system integrity, which of the following actions best balances the need for investigation with the protection of customer privacy? Option A. Grant broad, read-only access to the raw transaction logs for the entire IT operations team to conduct a comprehensive audit. Option B. Implement a process to pseudonymize the customer identifiers within the transaction logs before allowing the monitoring system to analyze them for anomalies. Option C. Inform all customers whose transaction logs are being reviewed about the ongoing investigation and the specific data being accessed. Option D. Immediately access and review the raw transaction logs, noting any suspicious activity, and escalate to the security team for further investigation. The correct answer is D. Immediately access and review the raw transaction logs, noting any suspicious activity, and escalate to the security team for further investigation. Explanation. The monitoring system demonstrates a potential breach of data privacy regulations, specifically concerning the handling of sensitive customer information. The challenge lies in balancing the need for effective system monitoring and anomaly detection with the imperative to protect individual privacy and comply with data protection laws. A professional must exercise careful judgment to ensure that data is anonymized or pseudonymized where possible, and access is strictly limited to authorized personnel for legitimate purposes. The correct approach involves implementing robust data anonymization techniques before the data is processed by the monitoring system. This ensures that personally identifiable information, PI, is removed or masked, thereby preventing unauthorized access or disclosure of sensitive customer details. This aligns with the principles of data minimization and purpose limitation, core tenets of data protection regulations. By anonymizing data, the organization upholds its ethical responsibility to protect customer privacy and avoids potential legal repercussions for data breaches. An incorrect approach that involves monitoring raw, unanonymized customer data without a clear, documented, and legally justifiable purpose presents significant regulatory and ethical failures. This could lead to violations of data protection laws, such as the General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR, if applicable, by processing PII without a lawful basis or adequate safeguards. It also creates an unacceptable ethical risk, as it exposes customer information to potential misuse or unauthorized access, eroding trust. Another incorrect approach, such as relying solely on internal access controls without technical data masking, is insufficient. While access controls are important, they do not prevent the data from being exposed if the system itself is compromised or if an authorized user misuses their access. This still leaves sensitive data vulnerable and fails to meet the standard of robust data protection. The professional reasoning process for such situations should involve a risk-based approach. First, identify the type of data being collected and processed. Second, assess the potential privacy risks associated with that data. Third, determine the legal and regulatory requirements applicable to that data. Fourth, implement technical and organizational measures to mitigate those risks, prioritizing data minimization, anonymization, and purpose limitation. Finally, regularly review and update these measures to ensure ongoing compliance and ethical conduct. Question 9. Upon reviewing a client's financial plan and investment portfolio, a financial advisor receives an urgent request from the client to withdraw a substantial sum of money to invest in a speculative, high-risk venture that has recently gained media attention. The client expresses significant anxiety about missing out on potential rapid gains and is insistent on immediate action, despite the withdrawal representing a significant portion of their retirement savings and deviating from their established long-term investment strategy. How should the financial advisor proceed? Option A. Politely decline the client's request, stating that the proposed investment is too risky and outside the scope of their agreed-upon financial plan. Option B. Agree to the withdrawal and investment without further discussion to avoid upsetting the client and maintain a positive client relationship. Option C. Discuss the client's request in detail, referencing their established financial plan and risk tolerance, and explore alternative strategies that align with their long-term goals while addressing their concerns. Option D. Immediately liquidate the requested amount from the client's diversified portfolio to meet their urgent demand and capitalize on the perceived opportunity. Correct answer is C. Discuss the client's request in detail, referencing their established financial plan and risk tolerance, and explore alternative strategies that align with their long-term goals while addressing their concerns. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a client's immediate financial needs and the long-term fiduciary duty owed to them. The pressure to generate short-term gains can lead to decisions that compromise the client's overall financial well-being and potentially violate regulatory standards designed to protect investors. Careful judgment is required to balance client requests with professional obligations and regulatory compliance. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach prioritizes the client's stated long-term financial goals and risk tolerance, as established in their financial plan. This aligns with the fiduciary duty to act in the client's best interest, which includes safeguarding their assets and ensuring investment strategies are suitable for their objectives. Adhering to the established financial plan, even when faced with a client's short-term, potentially impulsive request, demonstrates professional integrity and regulatory compliance. This approach ensures that decisions are not driven by immediate market sentiment or client anxiety, but by a well-reasoned, predefined strategy. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves immediately liquidating a significant portion of the client's diversified portfolio to meet the requested withdrawal. This fails to consider the long-term implications of such a drastic action, potentially crystallizing losses, incurring substantial transaction costs, and derailing the client's retirement goals. It also disregards the diversification strategy designed to mitigate risk. From a regulatory perspective, this could be seen as a breach of the duty of care and suitability, as it does not align with the client's established long-term objectives. Another incorrect approach is to dismiss the client's request outright without further discussion or exploration of alternatives. While the client's request may be ill-advised, a professional has a duty to engage with the client, understand the underlying reasons for their request, and educate them on the potential consequences. A complete dismissal can damage the client relationship and may lead the client to seek advice elsewhere, potentially from less scrupulous sources. Ethically, this demonstrates a lack of empathy and communication. A third incorrect approach is to agree to the withdrawal without adequately assessing the impact on the client's overall financial plan or exploring less detrimental alternatives. This could involve simply processing the request to avoid confrontation or to appease the client. This approach fails to uphold the fiduciary responsibility to provide sound financial advice and protect the client's interests. It prioritizes client satisfaction over prudent financial management and regulatory obligations. Professional reasoning. Professionals should first acknowledge the client's request and express understanding of their concerns. The next step is to schedule a meeting to thoroughly discuss the request, its underlying causes, and the potential consequences. During this discussion, the professional should refer back to the client's established financial plan, risk tolerance, and long-term goals. They should then present alternative solutions that might address the client's immediate need without jeopardizing their long-term objectives, such as exploring smaller withdrawals, temporary adjustments to cash flow, or discussing the feasibility of the original request in light of current market conditions and the client's overall financial health. This process ensures informed decision-making, client education, and adherence to professional and regulatory standards. Question 10. The risk matrix shows a moderate likelihood of a specific technical question within the Wipro hiring assessment test being misinterpreted due to ambiguous wording, potentially leading to a disproportionate number of candidates selecting an incorrect answer. This could impact the overall assessment's ability to accurately differentiate candidate skill levels. Considering the stakeholder perspective, which of the following actions best addresses this identified risk while upholding professional integrity? Option A. Inform candidates before the assessment begins that a specific question may be ambiguous and advise them to do their best. Option B. Proceed with the assessment as planned, assuming candidates will interpret the question correctly or that the impact on overall differentiation will be negligible. Option C. Make a note to review the question's effectiveness after the assessment concludes, focusing on gathering feedback to improve future assessments. Option D. Immediately flag the question to the assessment administrators for review and potential clarification or removal, prioritizing the accuracy and fairness of the assessment for all candidates. The correct answer is D. Immediately flag the question to the assessment administrators for review and potential clarification or removal, prioritizing the accuracy and fairness of the assessment for all candidates. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing competing stakeholder interests within the defined regulatory framework of the Wipro hiring assessment test. The core difficulty lies in interpreting the implications of a risk matrix, which is a tool for prioritizing potential issues, and translating that into actionable, ethically sound decisions that align with the assessment's objectives. The assessment aims to evaluate candidates' understanding of professional conduct and regulatory compliance, not just technical skills. Therefore, a decision that prioritizes short-term gains or expediency over long-term integrity and compliance would be professionally unsound. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it demonstrates a commitment to ethical conduct and adherence to the spirit of the Wipro hiring assessment test's guidelines. It involves a thorough understanding of the potential risks identified in the matrix and a proactive, principled response that safeguards the integrity of the assessment process. This approach prioritizes fairness, transparency, and the accurate evaluation of candidates, which are fundamental ethical and professional obligations in any assessment or hiring context. It aligns with the implicit regulatory expectation that assessment processes should be robust, fair, and free from undue influence or bias. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the immediate impact on the assessment's completion rate, without considering the underlying risks to integrity, fails to uphold professional standards. This would represent an ethical failure by potentially overlooking or downplaying issues that could compromise the validity of the assessment results. Another incorrect approach that involves making assumptions about the severity of risks without proper investigation or consultation would be a failure of due diligence and professional judgment. This could lead to either overreaction or underreaction, both of which undermine the credibility of the assessment. A third incorrect approach that prioritizes personal convenience or avoiding difficult conversations over addressing potential systemic issues would be a dereliction of professional responsibility. This demonstrates a lack of commitment to the ethical principles governing assessments and hiring. Professionals should approach such situations by first thoroughly understanding the risk matrix and its implications. This involves identifying the specific risks, their potential impact, and their likelihood. Next, they should consider the relevant ethical guidelines and regulatory expectations governing the assessment process. This would involve consulting internal policies and any specific instructions provided for the Wipro hiring assessment test. The decision-making process should then involve evaluating potential courses of action against these ethical and regulatory standards, considering the impact on all stakeholders, including candidates, the organization, and the integrity of the assessment itself. Prioritizing actions that uphold integrity, fairness, and compliance, even if they are more challenging, is crucial for sound professional decision-making. Question 11. Examination of the data shows a senior stakeholder has requested immediate access to specific client performance metrics from a recent project for an urgent internal review. The data is sensitive and contains personally identifiable information. You are aware of the project's confidentiality agreements and the Wipro hiring assessment test's emphasis on data integrity and ethical handling. What is the most appropriate course of action? Option A. Immediately provide the requested client performance metrics, assuming the senior stakeholder has the authority to access this information for an urgent review. Option B. Ignore the request, as direct sharing of client data is not explicitly permitted by your role. Option C. Provide a general overview of the project's success without including any specific client performance metrics or personally identifiable information, hoping this is sufficient. Option D. Politely inform the stakeholder that the data cannot be shared directly due to confidentiality and privacy concerns, and offer to provide anonymized or aggregated data that meets their review needs, or to facilitate a discussion with the client, if appropriate and authorized. The correct answer is D. Politely inform the stakeholder that the data cannot be shared directly due to confidentiality and privacy concerns, and offer to provide anonymized or aggregated data that meets their review needs, or to facilitate a discussion with the client if appropriate and authorized. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the immediate need for information with the ethical and regulatory obligations to protect client confidentiality and data privacy. The pressure to provide a quick response to a senior stakeholder can lead to shortcuts that violate these principles. Careful judgment is required to navigate the competing demands of transparency, efficiency, and compliance. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes adherence to the Wipro hiring assessment test's regulatory framework, which implicitly emphasizes data protection and ethical conduct. By seeking clarification and adhering to established protocols for data access and sharing, the professional demonstrates integrity and a commitment to responsible data handling. This aligns with the principles of data privacy and confidentiality that are fundamental in professional environments, ensuring that sensitive information is not disclosed inappropriately. An incorrect approach that involves directly sharing the client's personal information without proper authorization or anonymization fails to uphold the principle of client confidentiality. This is a direct violation of ethical standards and potentially regulatory guidelines that govern data handling, even if not explicitly detailed in the Wipro hiring assessment test syllabus. The underlying principles of professional conduct are universal. Another incorrect approach, which is to ignore the request, is professionally unacceptable as it demonstrates a lack of responsiveness and teamwork, potentially hindering legitimate business operations. While it avoids a data breach, it creates other professional issues. A third incorrect approach, which is to provide a vague or misleading answer, is also problematic as it can lead to misinformed decisions by the senior stakeholder and erodes trust. It is a form of dishonesty, even if not a direct data leak. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making framework when faced with such requests. This framework typically involves 1. Understanding the request, clearly ascertain what information is being sought and why. 2. Identifying relevant policies and regulations. Consult internal policies, ethical guidelines, and any applicable regulatory frameworks, in this case, the implicit standards of the Wipro hiring assessment test. 3. Assessing risks. Evaluate the potential consequences of fulfilling or not fulfilling the request, including data privacy breaches, ethical violations, and professional repercussions. 4. Exploring alternatives. Consider ways to fulfill the request ethically and compliantly, such as anonymizing data, seeking consent, or providing aggregated information. 5. Communicating and documenting. Clearly communicate the chosen course of action and the reasoning behind it, and document the decision-making process. Question 12. Performance analysis shows a consistent underestimation of client engagement metrics in a specific reporting segment, potentially impacting the perceived value of services delivered. While the immediate pressure is to meet quarterly targets, a junior analyst notices a recurring anomaly in the data collection process that, if corrected, would significantly alter the reported figures. The analyst is concerned about the implications of both reporting inaccurate data and the potential backlash from stakeholders if the corrected figures are significantly lower than previously presented. Which of the following represents the most professionally responsible course of action? Option A. Immediately investigate the data collection anomaly, document the findings, and present the accurate, corrected data to management with a clear explanation of the discrepancy and its implications, recommending a review of the data collection process. Option B. Adjust the existing data points slightly to bring the reported metrics closer to the target, assuming the anomaly is a minor system glitch that will likely be overlooked. Option C. Proceed with reporting the current, underestimated figures without mentioning the anomaly, hoping that the overall performance will eventually improve to offset the discrepancy. Option D. Raise concerns about the anomaly to colleagues but avoid formal reporting or investigation, as it might create unnecessary complications and potentially reflect poorly on the team's current reporting accuracy. The correct answer is A. Immediately investigate the data collection anomaly, document the findings, and present the accurate, corrected data to management with a clear explanation of the discrepancy and its implications, recommending a review of the data collection process. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing immediate performance pressures with long-term ethical considerations and regulatory compliance. The pressure to meet targets can lead to shortcuts that compromise data integrity and client trust, which are foundational to professional conduct and regulatory adherence. Careful judgment is required to navigate these competing demands. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes data accuracy and transparency, which are fundamental ethical obligations and often explicit requirements under various professional codes and regulations. By seeking clarification and adhering to established protocols, the professional demonstrates integrity and a commitment to responsible data handling. This aligns with the principle of acting in the best interest of the client and maintaining the reputation of the profession. An incorrect approach that involves manipulating data to meet targets represents a significant ethical failure and a potential regulatory breach. It undermines the integrity of performance analysis and can lead to misinformed decisions. This action erodes trust with stakeholders and could result in disciplinary action or legal consequences if discovered. Another incorrect approach, such as ignoring the discrepancy and proceeding without addressing it, demonstrates a lack of diligence and accountability. This passive stance can lead to the perpetuation of inaccurate information, which has downstream consequences. It fails to uphold the professional duty to ensure accuracy and can be seen as a dereliction of responsibility. A third incorrect approach, which involves blaming the system or colleagues without taking personal responsibility to investigate and rectify the issue, is unprofessional and deflects from the core problem. While systemic issues may exist, professional is expected to contribute to solutions rather than simply assign blame. This approach hinders effective problem solving and can damage team dynamics. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. 1. Identify the discrepancy and its potential impact. 2. Consult relevant policies, procedures, and ethical guidelines. 3. Seek clarification from appropriate sources, e.g., supervisor, data integrity teams. 4. Document all findings and actions taken. 5. Prioritize accuracy and integrity over short-term gains. 6. Escalate the issue if necessary, following established reporting lines. Question 13. The control framework reveals that a critical piece of information required for timely assessment is stored on a shared drive, but access permissions are unclear for your specific role. You need this information to complete your task within the deadline. What is the most appropriate course of action? Option A. Proceed with the assessment using your best judgment and available information, making assumptions where necessary to meet the deadline. Option B. Attempt to access the information directly from the shared drive, assuming your role implicitly grants access for assessment-related tasks. Option C. Ask a colleague who you believe has access to retrieve the information for you, without formally verifying their authorization. Option D. Immediately contact your direct supervisor or the designated assessment administrator to clarify access protocols and obtain the necessary information through the proper channels. Correct answer is B. Attempt to access the information directly from the shared drive, assuming your role implicitly grants access for assessment-related tasks. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the immediate need for information with the ethical and regulatory obligations to protect client confidentiality and data integrity. The pressure to deliver results quickly can lead to shortcuts that compromise these principles. Careful judgment is required to navigate the competing demands of efficiency and compliance. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes adherence to the Wipro hiring assessment test's established protocols and ethical guidelines. This involves seeking clarification through official channels, respecting data privacy, and ensuring that any information accessed or used is done so legitimately and with appropriate authorization. This aligns with the principles of responsible data handling and professional integrity expected in a corporate environment, particularly during assessment processes. An incorrect approach that involves bypassing standard procedures to access information directly from a colleague's system would represent a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This could violate data protection policies, breach client confidentiality if the information pertains to external clients, and undermine the integrity of the assessment process. It demonstrates a lack of respect for established controls and a disregard for the potential consequences of unauthorized access. Another incorrect approach, such as fabricating data or making assumptions without verification, would also be professionally unacceptable. This constitutes dishonesty and misrepresentation, directly contradicting the principles of accuracy and truthfulness expected in any professional assessment. It erodes trust and can lead to flawed decision-making based on unreliable information. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of the established control framework and ethical guidelines. When faced with ambiguity or pressure, professionals should 1. Identify the core problem and the information needed. 2. Consult relevant policies, procedures, and ethical codes. 3. Seek clarification from appropriate supervisors or designated points of contact. 4. Prioritize data integrity and confidentiality. 5. Document all actions and decisions. 6. If unsure, err on the side of caution and compliance. Question 14. Analysis of a situation where a junior financial analyst, Priya, identifies a potential anomaly in a quarterly report that, if real, could indicate a material misstatement. Priya is unsure of the exact cause but suspects it might be an error in data aggregation. She has not yet discussed this with her direct supervisor. What is the most appropriate immediate course of action for Priya? Option A. Immediately escalate the potential misstatement to the chief financial officer and the external auditors. Option B. Ignore the anomaly, assuming it is a minor data entry error that will be corrected in the final review. Option C. Conduct a thorough internal review of the data aggregation process and consult with her direct supervisor with her preliminary findings. Option D. Discuss her suspicions with trusted colleagues in other departments to gather their opinions on the anomaly. The correct answer is C. Conduct a thorough internal review of the data aggregation process and consult with her direct supervisor with her preliminary findings. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge where a junior analyst, Priya, has discovered a potential discrepancy in financial reporting that could impact investor confidence and regulatory compliance. The challenge lies in balancing the urgency of the situation with the established internal procedures and the need for accurate, verified information before escalating. Prematurely raising an alarm without thorough investigation could lead to unnecessary panic, damage to the company's reputation, and potentially misdirecting resources. Conversely, delaying the reporting of a genuine issue could have severe legal and ethical repercussions. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic, evidence-based decision-making process. Priya should first meticulously gather all relevant data and perform a preliminary analysis to confirm the nature and potential impact of the discrepancy. This aligns with professional ethical standards that require due diligence and accuracy. Subsequently, she should consult with her immediate supervisor, presenting her findings clearly and objectively. This adheres to internal reporting structures and allows for a collaborative assessment of the situation. This approach ensures that any escalation is based on verified facts, minimizing the risk of false alarms while ensuring prompt action if the discrepancy is confirmed. It reflects a commitment to transparency, integrity, and responsible corporate governance, which are paramount in financial reporting and are implicitly or explicitly covered by regulatory frameworks governing financial institutions. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach would be to immediately report the suspected discrepancy to senior management or external regulators without any prior investigation or consultation with her supervisor. This bypasses established internal protocols, demonstrates a lack of professional judgment in verifying information, and could be perceived as an act of insubordination or an attempt to circumvent proper channels. Ethically, it fails to uphold the principle of accuracy and due diligence. Another incorrect approach would be to ignore the discrepancy, hoping it resolves itself or is not significant. This is a severe ethical and regulatory failure. It demonstrates a lack of integrity and a disregard for professional responsibilities, potentially exposing the company to significant legal penalties and reputational damage if the issue is material. It violates the duty to act in the best interest of the company and its stakeholders. A third incorrect approach would be to discuss the suspected discrepancy with colleagues outside of the formal reporting structure before verifying the facts or informing her supervisor. This could lead to the spread of misinformation, create unnecessary anxiety, and potentially breach confidentiality obligations, all of which are professionally unacceptable and could have regulatory implications regarding internal controls and information handling. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such situations should employ a structured decision-making framework. This typically involves 1. Information gathering and verification. Collect all relevant data and confirm its accuracy. 2. Preliminary analysis. Assess the potential impact and nature of the issue. 3. Consultation. Discuss findings with immediate supervisor or designated point of contact. 4. Escalation if necessary. Based on verified findings and consultation, escalate through appropriate channels. 5. Documentation. Maintain clear records of all steps taken and decisions made. This framework ensures a balanced approach, prioritizing accuracy, adherence to procedures, and responsible action. Question 15. The efficiency study reveals that the current client onboarding process is taking an average of 15 business days, significantly longer than the industry benchmark of 7 business days. This delay is primarily attributed to manual data verification steps and a lack of integrated systems. Management is pushing for a rapid solution to reduce onboarding time to meet aggressive growth targets. What is the most appropriate decision-making approach to address this situation? Option A. Immediately implement a new, simplified onboarding checklist that bypasses several verification steps to drastically reduce processing time, with the understanding that any compliance issues will be addressed reactively. Option B. Introduce a new software system that promises faster processing, but has not undergone a comprehensive review for its ability to meet all regulatory data handling and security requirements. Option C. Focus solely on increasing the staffing levels within the onboarding team to process applications faster, without altering the existing procedures or technology. Option D. Implement a phased approach that involves a thorough root cause analysis of the onboarding delays, followed by the development and testing of technology-driven solutions that automate verification and integrate systems, while ensuring all regulatory compliance checks remain robust and are enhanced where necessary. The correct answer is D. Implement a phased approach that involves a thorough root cause analysis of the onboarding delays, followed by the development and testing of technology-driven solutions that automate verification and integrate systems, while ensuring all regulatory compliance checks remain robust and are enhanced where necessary. Explanation. The efficiency study reveals a significant bottleneck in the client onboarding process, leading to delays and potential client dissatisfaction. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the need for speed and efficiency with the imperative to adhere to regulatory requirements and ethical obligations. Rushing the process could lead to overlooking critical compliance checks, while an overly cautious approach might alienate clients and harm the firm's reputation. The correct approach emphasizes a structured, risk-based decision-making framework. This involves identifying the root cause of the bottleneck, assessing the associated risks, regulatory, reputational, operational, and then developing solutions that mitigate these risks while improving efficiency. This aligns with the principles of good governance and responsible business conduct, ensuring that compliance is not sacrificed for speed. It promotes a proactive approach to process improvement, integrating regulatory considerations from the outset. An incorrect approach that prioritizes speed above all else, by cutting corners on due diligence or verification steps, represents a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This could lead to breaches of anti-money laundering, AML, regulations, know your customer (KIC) requirements, or data protection laws, resulting in substantial fines, reputational damage, and potential legal action. Another incorrect approach, which involves implementing a quick fix without understanding the underlying cause, is also problematic. This often leads to superficial improvements that do not address the core issue and may even introduce new inefficiencies or compliance risks. It demonstrates a lack of thorough analysis and a failure to apply a robust decision-making framework. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a clear understanding of the problem and its potential impact. This involves gathering data, identifying all relevant stakeholders, and assessing risks from multiple perspectives: regulatory, operational, client, financial. Solutions should then be evaluated against these criteria, prioritizing those that offer the best balance of efficiency, compliance, and client satisfaction. Continuous monitoring and review are essential to ensure that implemented solutions remain effective and compliant. Question 16. Operational review demonstrates that a senior developer on a critical client project has recently acquired a significant number of shares in a company that is a direct competitor to one of the client's key suppliers. The developer has not disclosed this personal investment to their manager or the compliance department. What is the most appropriate course of action for the developer? Option A. Inform their manager of the investment, but suggest they can continue to manage the conflict independently without formal oversight. Option B. Immediately disclose the personal investment to their manager and the Wipro compliance department to assess and manage the potential conflict of interest. Option C. Continue working on the project as planned, assuming their professional judgment will not be influenced by the personal investment. Option D. Discreetly research the competitor's market position and potential impact on the client's supplier without informing management. Correct answer is B. Immediately disclose the personal investment to their manager and the Wipro compliance department to assess and manage the potential conflict of interest. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge where a team member's personal financial interests could potentially conflict with their professional duties. The challenge lies in identifying and managing this conflict transparently and ethically, ensuring that client interests and company integrity are not compromised. The pressure to meet project deadlines can sometimes lead to overlooking such potential conflicts, making vigilance and a robust decision-making framework crucial. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves immediate and transparent disclosure of the potential conflict of interest to the relevant authority within Wipro. This aligns with Wipro's Code of Conduct and ethical guidelines, which mandate reporting any situation that could reasonably be perceived as a conflict of interest. By disclosing, the employee allows the company to implement appropriate safeguards, such as reassigning responsibilities or implementing enhanced oversight, thereby protecting both the client and Wipro from any impropriety. This proactive measure upholds professional integrity and demonstrates a commitment to ethical business practices, which is a cornerstone of Wipro's operational philosophy. Incorrect approaches analysis. Proceeding with the project without disclosure, despite the personal financial interest, constitutes a significant ethical and regulatory failure. This action violates the principle of acting in the best interest of the client and the company, potentially leading to biased decision-making. It also breaches Wipro's internal policies on conflicts of interest, which are designed to prevent situations where personal gain could influence professional judgment. Such a failure can result in reputational damage for both the individual and Wipro, and could lead to disciplinary action. Attempting to mitigate the conflict internally without informing management is also professionally unacceptable. While the intention might be to resolve the issue discreetly, it bypasses established governance procedures. This approach fails to provide the necessary oversight and accountability that a formal disclosure process ensures. It also places the burden of managing the conflict solely on the individual, who may not have the authority or perspective to implement effective controls, thereby increasing the risk of an actual conflict materializing. Question 17. Research into the development of a new investment fund reveals that the product development team is eager to launch quickly to capture market interest. They propose a streamlined impact assessment process, focusing primarily on the fund's projected financial returns and the immediate regulatory filing requirements, with minimal consideration for potential downstream effects on different client segments or the operational capacity of the distribution channels. Which approach to impact assessment best aligns with regulatory expectations for responsible product development? Option A. Rely on the subjective opinions of senior management and a few experienced sales representatives to gauge the product's potential impact, without formal data collection or structured analysis. Option B. Prioritize the speed of market entry by conducting a superficial impact assessment that only covers projected financial returns and basic regulatory compliance, assuming any unforeseen issues can be addressed post-launch. Option C. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment that systematically evaluates the product's potential effects on all relevant stakeholders, including clients, employees, and the market, alongside financial and operational considerations, and document all findings and mitigation strategies. Option D. Delegate the entire impact assessment process to an external consultant, accepting their report without conducting thorough internal review or validation of their methodologies and conclusions. The correct answer is C. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment that systematically evaluates the product's potential effects on all relevant stakeholders, including clients, employees, and the market, alongside financial and operational considerations, and document all findings and mitigation strategies. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the immediate need for a new product launch with the potential long-term consequences of inadequate impact assessment. The pressure to meet market demands can lead to shortcuts, but failing to thoroughly assess the impact of a new financial product can expose the firm and its clients to unforeseen risks, potentially leading to regulatory breaches and reputational damage. Careful judgment is required to ensure that the assessment process, while efficient, is also comprehensive and robust. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a systematic and documented impact assessment that considers various stakeholder perspectives and potential risks. This aligns with regulatory expectations for responsible product development and risk management. Specifically, it adheres to principles of good governance and consumer protection, ensuring that the product's implications are understood before market introduction. This proactive approach minimizes the likelihood of future compliance issues and demonstrates a commitment to ethical conduct. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on market demand and speed of launch, neglecting a thorough impact assessment, would be professionally unacceptable. This failure constitutes a breach of regulatory duty to conduct due diligence and risk assessment, potentially violating consumer protection laws and market conduct regulations. It also represents an ethical failure to act with due care and diligence, prioritizing short-term gains over the long-term well-being of clients and the firm's stability. Another incorrect approach that relies on anecdotal evidence or the experience of a few individuals without a structured assessment process is also professionally unsound. This lacks the objectivity and rigor required by regulatory frameworks for impact analysis. It can lead to biased conclusions and the overlooking of critical risks, thereby failing to meet the standards of professional conduct and potentially contravening guidelines on evidence-based decision-making. A further incorrect approach that outsources the entire impact assessment without adequate internal oversight or validation would be problematic. While external expertise can be valuable, the ultimate responsibility for the assessment and its findings rests with the firm. Failing to maintain internal control and understanding of the assessment process can lead to a lack of accountability and an inability to respond effectively to identified issues, which is a failure in professional governance and risk management. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured risk assessment framework. This includes clearly defining the scope of the assessment, identifying potential impacts across all relevant dimensions: financial, operational, reputational, regulatory, client impact. Gathering appropriate data, analyzing findings, documenting conclusions, and establishing mitigation plans. Professionals should always refer to the specific regulatory guidelines applicable to their jurisdiction and industry to ensure compliance and best practice. A culture of ethical responsibility and a commitment to thoroughness, even under pressure, are paramount. Question 18. The assessment process reveals that a candidate, who is being evaluated for a role that involves strategic decision-making regarding technology investments, has recently made a significant personal investment in a technology startup that is a direct competitor to a company being considered as a potential partner in the Wipro hiring assessment test. How should the candidate ethically and professionally navigate this situation to ensure the integrity of the assessment? Option A. Disclose the personal investment to the assessment administrators and recuse themselves from any part of the assessment that involves evaluating or making recommendations about the competing company or its potential partnership. Option B. Proceed with the assessment as planned, believing their personal objectivity will not be compromised by their private financial interests. Option C. Withdraw from the assessment without providing any specific reason to avoid any appearance of impropriety. Option D. Downplay the significance of their personal investment and continue with the assessment, assuring the administrators that their professional judgment remains unaffected. The correct answer is A. Disclose the personal investment to the assessment administrators and recuse themselves from any part of the assessment that involves evaluating or making recommendations about the competing company or its potential partnership. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge where a candidate's personal financial interests could potentially conflict with their duty to provide objective advice during the Wipro hiring assessment test. The challenge lies in maintaining impartiality and ensuring that any recommendations made are solely in the best interest of the assessment's integrity and fairness, rather than being influenced by personal gain. This requires a high degree of ethical awareness and adherence to professional conduct guidelines. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach demonstrates a commitment to transparency and the avoidance of conflicts of interest, which are fundamental principles in professional assessments. By disclosing the potential conflict and recusing themselves from any part of the assessment that could be influenced by their personal investment, the candidate upholds the integrity of the process. This aligns with the ethical guidelines of professional assessments, which mandate that individuals must act impartially and avoid situations where their personal interests could compromise their professional judgment. This proactive disclosure and recusal ensures that the assessment remains fair and unbiased for all participants, reflecting best professional practice. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves proceeding with the assessment without disclosure. This is a significant ethical failure as it violates the principle of transparency and creates a hidden conflict of interest. It could lead to biased evaluation or recommendation, undermining the credibility of the assessment and potentially disadvantaging other candidates. This breaches the implicit trust placed in the assessor to act with integrity. Another incorrect approach is to downplay the significance of the personal investment and proceed with the assessment, believing personal objectivity can be maintained. This is an ethical lapse because it demonstrates a lack of understanding of how even perceived conflicts can erode trust and fairness. Professional ethics require proactive management of potential conflicts, not a subjective assessment of one's own ability to remain impartial when a conflict exists. This approach risks compromising the assessment's integrity. A further incorrect approach is to withdraw from the assessment entirely without any explanation or disclosure. While withdrawal might seem like a way to avoid conflict, it is professionally inadequate if it stems from a failure to address the conflict appropriately. Best practice involves addressing the conflict through disclosure and appropriate recusal, rather than simply disappearing, which can leave the assessment process incomplete or raise questions about the candidate's professionalism. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing potential conflicts of interest should follow a structured decision-making process. First, identify any situation where personal interests might influence professional judgment. Second, assess the nature and significance of the potential conflict. Third, consult relevant professional codes of conduct and organizational policies. Fourth, disclose the conflict to the appropriate parties. Fifth, take steps to mitigate or eliminate the conflict, which may include recusal from specific duties. This systematic approach ensures that professional integrity is maintained and that decisions are made ethically and impartially. Question 19. Governance review demonstrates that a new customer-facing feature is technically ready for deployment, but its potential impact on existing operational workflows, data integrity, and regulatory reporting has not been fully evaluated. The business unit is eager to launch the feature to meet competitive pressures, which approach best balances innovation with prudent risk management and regulatory compliance. Option A. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment to identify and mitigate potential risks before deployment. Option B. Prioritize the technical implementation and launch, assuming operational and regulatory impacts will be minimal and manageable. Option C. Postpone the launch indefinitely until a perfect, risk-free implementation can be guaranteed. Option D. Proceed with the launch immediately to capitalize on market opportunities, addressing any issues as they arise. The correct answer is A. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment to identify and mitigate potential risks before deployment. Explanation: scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between immediate business needs and the long-term implications of a significant system change. The pressure to deliver a new feature quickly, coupled with the potential for unforeseen negative impacts on existing operations and customer experience, requires careful judgment. A hasty implementation without a thorough impact assessment could lead to operational disruptions, regulatory breaches, and reputational damage, all of which are critical concerns for a financial services firm. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves conducting a comprehensive impact assessment. This aligns with best professional practice and regulatory expectations for change management. A robust impact assessment systematically identifies potential consequences across various domains, including operational efficiency, data integrity, customer service, and regulatory compliance. By proactively identifying risks and developing mitigation strategies, the firm can make an informed decision about the implementation, ensuring that the benefits of the new feature outweigh the potential downsides and that all regulatory obligations are met. This approach demonstrates due diligence and a commitment to responsible innovation. Incorrect approaches analysis. Implementing the new feature without any assessment would be a significant regulatory and ethical failure. It disregards the principle of prudent risk management, which is a cornerstone of financial regulation. Such an approach could lead to operational failures that violate data protection laws, e.g., GDPR if applicable, or similar data privacy regulations, or market conduct rules if customer transactions are affected. Ethically, it prioritizes short-term gains over customer well-being and operational stability, delaying the implementation indefinitely until all possible impacts are theoretically understood, without any practical assessment or phased approach, is also professionally unsound. This approach fails to balance innovation with risk and can lead to missed market opportunities, hindering the firm's competitiveness. While caution is necessary, an overly cautious stance that paralyzes progress without a clear rationale or defined path forward is not a sustainable business practice and can indirectly lead to regulatory scrutiny for failing to adapt to market demands. Focusing solely on the technical feasibility of the new feature, without considering its broader business and regulatory implications, represents a narrow and incomplete assessment. This approach risks overlooking critical non-technical impacts, such as customer experience degradation, increased operational costs due to manual workarounds, or non-compliance with reporting requirements. This siloed thinking is a common cause of regulatory breaches and operational failures in complex financial environments. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a structured, risk-based approach to change management. This involves 1. Clearly defining the scope and objectives of the change. 2. Identifying all potential stakeholders and affected systems. 3. Conducting a thorough impact assessment that considers operational, technical, financial, customer, and regulatory dimensions. 4. Developing a risk mitigation plan for identified risks. 5. Obtaining appropriate approvals based on the assessment findings. 6. Implementing the change with robust monitoring and post-implementation review. This systematic process ensures that decisions are data-driven, risks are managed, and regulatory compliance is maintained. Question 20. Which approach would be most appropriate for a project manager to take when a critical system security update, scheduled for immediate deployment, is unexpectedly delayed due to unforeseen technical issues discovered during the final testing phase? Option A. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment to understand the consequences of the delay and inform the revised deployment plan. Option B. Proceed with the deployment of the update as originally scheduled, assuming the discovered issues are minor and will resolve themselves. Option C. Attempt to deploy a partial or untested version of the update to meet the original deadline, prioritizing speed over thoroughness. Option D. Immediately halt all further work on the update and indefinitely postpone its deployment until a new, unspecified timeline can be established. The correct answer is A. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment to understand the consequences of the delay and inform the revised deployment plan. Explanation: scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in project management where a critical system update intended to enhance security and performance is unexpectedly delayed. The professional challenge lies in balancing the urgency of the update with the potential risks of a rushed implementation, the impact on ongoing business operations, and the need for transparent communication with stakeholders. A hasty decision could lead to system instability, data breaches, or financial losses, while excessive delay could expose the organization to known vulnerabilities. Careful judgment is required to assess the true impact of the delay and determine the most responsible course of action. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves conducting a thorough impact assessment. This aligns with best professional practices and regulatory expectations for risk management and system integrity. A comprehensive impact assessment would systematically evaluate the consequences of the delay across various dimensions: operational continuity, security posture, financial implications, e.g., potential downtime costs, delayed benefits, reputational damage, and compliance requirements. This data-driven approach allows for informed decision-making, enabling the project team to prioritize mitigation strategies, communicate realistic timelines, and justify resource allocation. It demonstrates due diligence and a commitment to responsible project execution, minimizing unforeseen negative outcomes. Incorrect approaches analysis. Proceeding with the update without a proper assessment, despite the delay, represents a failure to adequately manage risk. This could lead to the introduction of new, unforeseen issues due to the rushed nature of the implementation, potentially violating internal security policies and industry best practices for change management. It disregards the principle of thorough testing and validation, which are crucial for system stability and security. Postponing the update indefinitely without understanding its criticality or the risks of not implementing it is also professionally unsound. This approach fails to acknowledge the potential security vulnerabilities or performance limitations that the update is designed to address. It could leave the organization exposed to threats or inefficiencies, potentially violating compliance obligations related to maintaining secure systems. This passive stance neglects the proactive responsibilities of IT management. Implementing a partial or untested version of the update to meet an arbitrary deadline is a high-risk strategy. This approach prioritizes speed over quality and security, significantly increasing the likelihood of system failures, data corruption, or security breaches. It demonstrates a lack of professional integrity and a disregard for the potential harm to the organization and its users. Such actions could have serious regulatory implications if they lead to non-compliance with data protection laws or security standards. Professional reasoning. Professionals faced with such a situation should adopt a structured, risk-based decision-making process. This involves 1. Clearly defining the problem in its immediate context. 2. Identifying all potential stakeholders and their concerns. 3. Gathering all relevant information about the delay and the update itself. 4. Systematically evaluating the potential impacts of different courses of action, prioritizing a formal impact assessment. 5. Developing and evaluating mitigation strategies for identified risks. 6. Communicating transparently with stakeholders about the situation, the assessment findings, and the proposed plan. 7. Documenting all decisions and justifications. This methodical approach ensures that decisions are well-reasoned, defensible, and aligned with professional ethics and regulatory requirements.